Okay, so thank you for being here. So today I will first present the big question I intend to address in the coming years, so it goes beyond the residency here. Then I will say a few words about who I am to address that question, and then go into more specific features of the project directly related to the stay here and the region here. So this is the big question. So the context is what is called the takeoff from stagnation to growth, or sometimes called the rise of the West. So it's the fact that you observe after 1800 an increasing gap in standard of living between Europe and maybe Western Europe in particular and the rest of the world. So it's an increasing gap in income, but also in many things. So in longevity, in health, in democracy, in education, in literacy, in many things. It's related to the Industrial Revolution, but it's not the only aspect of it. So there is this phenomenon, which is very well documented and discussed. And I think the literature there agrees to say that it's about a virtuous cycle between technological progress, better institutions, and growth. So those things go together, interact together, and so it generated the takeoff. Now the question is, what were the key forces that made those circles possible? And so, yeah, and there is a debate. People disagree. So what I want to do is to wonder whether the elites, and I mean here the intellectual elites, not the political, religious elites, but the intellectual elites were key in triggering this takeoff. So that's what I call in the project upper tail human capital. So that's a kind of strange word, but it's now the standard. So you have human capital, so knowledge, if you want, is distributed in the population, and upper tail, we look at the top of the distribution. So the people having being at the top in terms of knowledge. And so I will define this group in a precise sense, and I will look at professors at universities and members of scientific academies. This is how I define that group. Then, before starting the project, we could wonder what are the possible answers to my question, whether those elites were important or not. And I think there are 4 types of answers we might expect to get at the end. One is probably the standard one, is to say there are great scientists that develop scientia, then science get applied, and then that makes the Industrial Revolution possible, and hence the growth in income, literacy follows, health, standard of living, urbanization, everything. So that's one possible question. It's heavily disputed, and what I understood, it's a very British debate, because apparently, so the word Industrial Revolution is related to Britain, because that's the place where it took place first. And there is this debate whether universities, for example, were useful or contrary, whether it was all simple people who were great inventors and designed new machines and so on. So even if you dispute this claim, maybe you could think that elite knowledge, they triggered a cultural change during the scientific revolution and the Enlightenment period. A cultural change that made possible to accept the modern world. So this is maybe more related to kind of secularization process So accepting that there are things to discover, that everything has not been written by Aristotle or Platon. So that's another, and so there is a recent book by Joël Mokyr, who is a leading economic historian in the field, A Culture of Growth, which defends that view. Then another mechanism could be through more strictly human capital in the narrow sense. So elite knowledge, so like they write books, they educate population, or at least they educate teachers that will educate population. Maybe they produce better citizens, they make labor more open to the adoption of new techniques, and maybe this is a key channel. And then you have the fourth possibility, which is to say all those universities, it's just a luxury good, you go there to enjoy life, but it's totally useless and not related to the takeoff of modern growth. So those are the principles. And then you have the debates. Is this, those elite guys, maybe they are necessary for growth? Maybe a society without any scientific knowledge would not be able to take off, but maybe they are not, it's not sufficient. Okay, so that's the big frame. So then what I intend to do to address that question. So the big part is the bullet point number one. It's to build a database of university professors and members of academies in Europe over the period 1200-1800. So concretely, it's to go to take universities by universities, academies by academies, try to find a list of members. If not, I will explain you what you are doing right now for Aix-University, where you have no list, how we can try to approach that population. Then, once this is done, maybe in 5 years from now, so imagine, so I have this population, I know where they worked, where they were born, how long they lived, what they wrote. Because once you have the guys, it's easy to map that data with their production through library catalogs, which are there. So there is maybe WorldCat, which is a catalog of all catalogs. So even a very obscure person for whom we have lost all tracks, if that person has written something that has survived until now, you can find that in that catalog of catalogs. Then once this is done, we can have a density of human capital, a composition, we can try to measure quality, and we can do correlation and causality analysis across time, space, fields, and to see how this maps into better institutions, adoption of techniques, development of literacy, numeracy, urbanization, all those things that are already available in Then there is the issue of causality that I will not discuss too much today, and then there is also a possibility to do some theoretical works there, because this is quite unexplored, I think, in terms of models. Just to give a flavor of the universe of that project, so here you have a map of Europe, where you have all important knowledge institutions from 1200 to 1800. So in blue you have universities, then you have all universities, that's a full sample. A university being defined as an institution granting PhDs. Then you have also academies, and here it's important academies, because there is an infinite number of academies. So here I took a list from somewhere about the important academies. That's about 300 institutions, for which it should be good to know their members. Just one little remark, look at Spain. It's quite interesting. Spain, you have a lot of universities. Most of them were created in the 16th century as were Jesuit universities, as an engine against the Protestants, so counter-Reformation. But you don't see any academies. It's a concept that was probably born in Italy, and then developed a lot in 17th and 18th century, so it's at the end of my period. But except in Barcelona, you don't see anything in Spain.
What about monasteries? Convent monasteries?
There were many. They were the original, before universities, they were the place that transmitted knowledge. But yeah, that's...
So who are you?
Then who I am. As we said last time, I'm an economist by training. So I worked a lot on what is called growth theory. And here I wanted to say what is theory for us, because I interacted a lot with demographers, and I realized that a theory for them, it's completely different from what is a theory for us. So a theory for us, usually it's a formal model with math, where we have assumptions and we derive consequences of some assumptions. And so there is something about growth theory, trying to model mathematically what could be the engine of growth and what would be the properties of growth. And in growth theory, there is a big field about human capital, in which there is some magics there. So human capital, we all love human capital, of course. It translates into growth through some accumulation functions and so on. And so in a sense here, I want to open a little bit that black box by looking at actual universities, at actual people. So it's based on individual data, and think about what could be the role. I would like to say I have some interdisciplinary experience. So I have some joint authorship with an historian, with an applied philosopher, and with a demographer. In Louvain, where I'm based, I'm currently leading a project with the demographers, which is called Family Transformations and Norms, Incentives and Norms, I forgot incentives. And I would like also to say that we started in Louvain a new journal, which is at the intersection between demography and economics, called Journal of Demographic Economics, published by Cambridge University Press. Then I wanted to say something here. As an economist, because sometimes people misperceive what economists actually do, what is their object of study, no? And then I wanted to say that probably economics is the discipline studying individual incentives to do things. No? So that would be the definition. When I was young, I was told it's how to allocate limited resources to infinite needs. That was the old definition, but the new definition is more the science of incentives. And so in this project, where are incentives? Probably the incentives to go here or there for scientists, that's an important one. But you could also look at incentives of universities. Are we going to open a new faculty doing chemistry, for example, besides the usual theology, medicine, law, and arts? And you could also wonder what's the incentive to write books, because all those guys I'm going to look at, they wrote a lot. So I would like to discuss the design and improve the design of the project. And I also would like to look at more closely at the local area, including Aix-Marseille and Montpellier, and starting to collect data and so on. It also helps to think about what can be done or not. Now I will show you where I stand in terms of the local stuff there. So you should know Montpellier, so it's 2 hours drive west from here. The official founding date is 1289, so it's a very old university, among the very first. As usual, as often, there was something before the official founding date. So those universities were more a bottom-up phenomenon than just somebody decided to create a university. So there were people there teaching medicine, and then at some point it was acknowledged by the Pope or by the Prince or by the King. So, and so Montpellier is especially well known for medicine. We had some talks about medicine before this morning, so we keep the line. That's one of the best schools in medicine. So for the moment, I collected data on professors in medicine in Montpellier. So I have 140 people. that come from a book written on history of the medical faculty. So the best case for me, it's a guy that wrote a book about the professors of Montpellier, documenting their biography of that's easy. Then Aix, so kind of ancestor of our university here. So it was founded or acknowledged in 1409 by the Count of Provence, and it's supposed to be famous for law, essentially. But they had, as most universities at the time, theology, law, medicine, and arts. There is nothing. You can do, if you meet a professor from the Aix-Marseille University, ask him or her, who are the famous guys before 1800? You will get no answer, probably.
Why? There is nobody.
It's not true. It's not true. There are many people, but it's not known. And the university, what is remarkable, so in the Netherlands, in Germany, for example, universities are very much attached to looking at the past. So if you look at Groningen University, Utrecht, Leiden, there is a website where you can search and you have the list of all professors since the beginning. So here you have nothing. But you have books very often written in the 19th century. It's a 19th century thing to try to organize knowledge about what was done before. So there are books about the history of the university and also Cartularium, which is putting in the same place all the important documents about the universities. And then you can look at the books and then look at the names that appear. So they will talk about a fighting between the professors in medicine on whether they should do that or that. Then you have the names, and then you can go to biographical dictionaries, try to get more information, where they were born and so on. You could look at WorldCat about their publication, and in that way, building a database of who are those guys. Then you also have scientific academies created in 17th, 18th century, Marseille, Montpellier, plus some others. That's much easier because the membership to an academy is something very well defined. While being professor at a university, it's not like today. It was a kind of vague notion. So you should also know that all universities and academies in France were abolished in 1793 with the French Revolution, and then other institutions were created to replace them progressively. Now I wanted to show a map. We already had some maps, and it's always good to have maps. It's beautiful. Here it's the University of Montpellier. What I've plotted is the place of birth and Montpellier there to give an idea of the mobility of people and the attraction of the place. And you have it by period. So you see we cover the period, and I want to show you, to stress the blue dots. The blue dots is the earlier period, and I was amazed by the mobility of those guys. So you have people coming from quite far away. So these maps can show you maybe comparing this across universities and so on. You learn a lot about the mobility of people, and it's possible also to compute some indicators, more formal indicators about this. And so, of course, I can zoom here, and you have more details, but I have no time to do that. So Montpellier, I think it was a very attractive place. It's maybe the attraction is declining over time. When you compute the average distance between birth and Montpellier, it's declining over time. Question, is it the fate of any institution? When you start a new stuff, you will bring people from far away, and then as time passes, maybe you don't need to attract people from that far, or maybe you are getting a bit more old, more obsolete, and you finally attract just local people. I don't know if it's a general trend or something specific to Montpellier. Then Aix, this is what we get. So for Aix we have 300 names, so you see we have much less observations with the place of birth than we have Montpellier. But Aix, it's all faculties, so all the 4 faculties. That's what it is for the moment. Then there is a question we would like, so universities is one thing, but you understand that maybe I will be at some point able to measure quality of those universities. And I think there are 4 ways I can think of for the moment, which are all imperfect, to measure quality, to do a medieval ranking of universities, like the medieval Shanghai. So we could think that if people come from far away, if the professors are from far away, that's a sign of quality. Maybe also the diversity of those guys, if they come from many places, could also be a sign. We could build the diversity indexes. So as I said, we could look at publications held in libraries. It's not perfect because it has biases and so on, but that's something. You could also, so you have Wikipedia, you could look at the length of the Wikipedia pages. That's also imperfect indicators because some countries are more active than others in producing Wikipedia pages, but that's something, why not? And then of course, as long as I increase my database, I will find some names elsewhere. And so I will be able to see whether those guys, they also went to other universities, in Basel, then in Tübingen, and then in Stockholm. And then I also think that if I get a very good coverage of the south of France, I could say something about the brain drain. So the brain drain, it's a topic that has been developed quite a lot by economists and in the economic development literature. I don't think that historians address that issue with the same angle, like the fact that when you lose people, like elite people, that might harm your development process. So if we have a very good coverage of Provence, we will know all the people that came in from elsewhere, like the maps I showed. And then by looking elsewhere, I will get a sample of the people born in Provence that have been elsewhere, and say something about the brain drain. And I see several reasons why there could be a brain drain. You have these religious wars. So here, we are not far from a region in France where Protestantism was quite strong, and then many of those guys left when the King of France decided to revocate the edict that allowed them to be Protestant. And you might also have the attraction of Paris. So at some point in the 17th century, maybe, Paris became a very important place, and then for elite people, it was good to get an appointment there in an academy or in a...
Thank you, David.
Okay.
So we have time.